I want to welcome everyone to tonight's Alabama Secretary of State Candidate Forum. It's 6 o'clock, so it's time to start. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Alabama, and this is one of the most consequential elected positions for Alabama in 2022. As Alabama's chief elections official, the Secretary of State is required by law to protect and ensure voting rights. I apologize for that. I am YouTube limited sometimes. But going back to the introduction, the Secretary of State's position is one of the most consequential for Alabama in 2022. And the reason is because the Secretary of State is required by law to protect and ensure voting rights for every eligible citizen, to provide fair, accessible, and secure elections. And the Secretary of State is statutorily required to serve on or appoint members to numerous boards and commissions which directly relate to voting. The vital importance of the Alabama Secretary of State office was why last April we sponsored a primary election candidate forum for the Secretary of State for the GOP primary candidates. Now the League of Women Voters is sponsoring this general election candidate online forum for the Secretary of State for all the candidates running in the November general election. And those participating with us tonight are Democratic candidate Pamela Lafitte and Matt Shelby, the Libertarian candidate. Wes Allen, the Republican candidate who won the GOP primary, declined to participate due to conflicts in his schedules. The candidate forum will follow league guidelines and will give each candidate time to introduce themselves and then answer questions that focus on the Secretary of State position. And we want to give you, the voters, a chance to learn more about those who are wanting to be your Secretary of State and what their positions are and the policies that they would like to focus on for the state of Alabama. And we believe that these types of open forums provide an excellent opportunity for you to learn more about the candidates and to make better decisions when you go to the polls. Over the next hour, if you have a question, please place it in the Q&A button. The chat is not where we would prefer you put them in the Q&A area of the webinar. A panel of league volunteers will be reviewing the audience questions from the Zoom, as well as YouTube and Facebook, to pick questions that the moderator who will answer will ask the candidates once we've gotten through the first set of questions. And just so you know, we have requested the candidates to please refrain from answering the questions back to you directly during the forum, because we will ask each one of them the same questions. And it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for tonight, Ms. Marissa Grayson. She is Associate Professor of Political Science, University Pre-Law Advisor, and Director of the Public Administration Program at the Howard College of Arts and Sciences at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. She began teaching political science at Samford University in August of 2010. And before coming to Samford, she served as the Director of Debate at the University of Florida and taught classes in public speaking and in public leadership. At Samford, she teaches a variety of courses in political science department, including the department's introductory courses in political power and politics, American government, and upper level courses in American politics and American public policy and political behavior. And we are so fortunate to have her now as our moderator tonight. And her commitment to teaching was honored when she received the 2015-2016 John H. Buchanan Award for Excellence in Teaching at Samford. So now I'm going to hand it off to Marissa, and she will introduce the panel, the candidates.
Thank you so much for the privilege to moderate this debate. I want to welcome our Democratic candidate, Pamela Lafitte, and Libertarian candidate, Matt Shelby. I will give them the opportunity to introduce themselves really soon, but first I just want to cover some rules so that everyone understands how the debate will go, or the forum will go. So each candidate will have 2 minutes for their introduction. When I'm done going over the rules, we'll let Ms. Lafitte introduce herself first. The first question will then start with Mr. Shelby, and we'll go back and forth. All the questions after the introduction are 1 minute and 30 seconds long. We'll have a timer going so that everyone's aware of how much time they have left. And if a candidate goes over the time allotment, their microphone will be turned off. If there are any follow-up questions from myself, we'll give each candidate about 30 seconds to answer. As you were told, there will be the opportunity to put questions in the Q&A, and should we have time, I will add your questions at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to let you hear from the people you'd like to hear from, and we will first hear from Ms. Lafitte, where she will introduce herself.
Good evening to everyone. Thank you, League of Women Voters and the panelists who are joining us this evening. I am Pamela J. Lafitte. I am the Democratic nominee for the Secretary of State's office. I am a graduate of Faulkner University with a bachelor's degree in business, emphasis in management. I am a veteran of the United States Air Force Reserves, 14 years, 8 months served in Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and Noble Eagle, receiving numerous awards and decorations, commendations. I am a veteran, not also about to become a veteran of the Mobile County Sheriff's Office, close to retirement of 25 years. I have tenured service of 24 years as a corrections sergeant, rising through the ranks of leadership there. And also, I want you to know that I'm a member of the State Democratic Executive Committee, right in place 99, place 101. Because of gerrymandering, I'm placed in 99 at this time. Member of Alabama Democratic Party with numerous activities and etc.
Great, thank you, Ms. Lafitte. Mr. Shelby?
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here and get to exchange ideas with y'all and with Ms. Lafitte. Again, my name is Matt Shelby. I'm the Libertarian candidate for Alabama Secretary of State. I've been a resident of Alabama almost my entire life. I was born and raised here. I live in Baldwin County now. I attended Auburn University for undergrad, Alabama for law school. After law school, I returned to Baldwin County, where I worked as an assistant district attorney for about 1.5 years before going into private practice, which is what I'm doing now. Now, the Secretary of State, as was mentioned at the start of this, is just a very, very important office. And one reason that it's so important to me as a candidate for a third party is because of the influence it has on elections and ballot access. Now, Democrats and Republicans can't agree on much, but one thing they all agree on is they don't want competition. They don't want competition from third parties or independents like myself. Now, that's not to say that Ms. Lafitte specifically says that, but in general, I think we've seen that through the laws that have been passed by our state legislature. So what people probably don't understand is the links we have to go to as a third party just to get on the ballot. We have some of the worst ballot access laws in the country. Our party actually gained statewide ballot access this year. We turned in over 70,000 signatures to the Secretary of State. We had to get over 50,000. Just to stay on the ballot, we have to receive 20% of the vote in a statewide election. Now, those are way outside of the norm in America and in the Southeast. 2%, I believe, is the mean that people need to get in an election to preserve the ballot access. And certainly the ballot access requirements in terms of petition signatures are much lower. So I think having a libertarian in that office would be very helpful, not just to other third-party candidates, but also to the voters of Alabama to ensure that they have options up and down the ballot, not just left or right, not just red or blue. Thank you.
Thank you both. Ms. Lafitte, I promise there will be the opportunity to talk about ballot access and respond if you'd like. That's going to be my second question. So don't think that I'm not giving you the opportunity to respond. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Shelby, ask you, what do you see as the most important responsibilities of the Secretary of State's office? And if elected, what would be your priorities?
Well, I think I kind of foreshadowed that a little bit with what I just said. I think that I know the Secretary of State is the chief election officer in the state of Alabama. Now, it is important to understand that the Secretary of State cannot pass laws. The state legislator has to pass laws. But just like a governor or a president can have a legislative agenda, the Secretary of State can have a legislative agenda also. So the things I would focus on, again, are ballot access. We need the ballot access requirements for third parties and independents to be lowered. Getting over 50,000 ballot access signatures, petition signatures is a huge burden. I think our party spent north of $250,000 to get ballot access, whereas the Democrats and Republicans are on the ballot automatically every election. So I'd want to look at that. I would also want to look at potentially other ways to have our elections. Now, we're all used to the first past the post voting system. That's what we have in Alabama and many other places. But you're seeing in states like Maine and Alaska where they're trying different things. For instance, ranked choice voting. So I think that looking at other systems that may be more inclusive to candidates with different ideas and may allow voters to vote their conscience and not just pick the lesser of two evils would be helpful also. So those are a couple of things I'd really focus on as Secretary of State.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lafitte, the same questions. What do you see as the most important responsibilities and what would be your priorities?
My priorities would be integrity, to bring integrity to office, excellence, accountability, and transparency. I want to make sure that everyone knows also that the Secretary of State's office is not just only the chief of election officer, but has many roles and duties within that office itself. And it is over 1,000 duties. You maintaining the records of the state of Alabama, the Great Seal of the state of Alabama. You're responsible of the notary publics for the entire state, and the list goes on. You also I want to piggyback about elections. I want to see actually that in the office, we fight election subversion, which is a dismantle of elections on the election day. I want to fight the voter suppression that is, if any, in the state of Alabama. I want to make sure that we have a voice, even though Alabama's law states that the employer is to give employees 1 hour to go and vote. But sometimes the employer may say we're overstaffed, we're understaffed, we do not have time to let you go vote. And then when it's time for that employee to go and vote on election day, they can't vote. That's the vote that didn't count. And so what happens is the voter turnout becomes lower. They cannot fill out an excuse absentee ballot because the deadline has passed. And so I want to see early voting in Alabama on Friday, Saturday, Monday. And then I want to see where excuse absentee ballot is no excuse absentee ballot and many more things.
Well, okay. And you both will get some opportunities to talk about those specifics because I'll ask the next question. It's going to go to Ms. Lafitte and it deals with Alabama and voting. So several recent studies have ranked Alabama as very low on ease of voting. So the studies have differed in their approaches, but all included factors such as how to register to vote, access to early voting. In Alabama, there's no early voting and it's often confused with absentee voting. So what legislation, rules, or policies would you focus on to make it easier for voting in our state while continuing to keep our voting secure, which we don't really have voting irregularities in Alabama? I know you've mentioned some, but I'd love for you to share, and then that way we can also let Mr. Shelby respond.
I want to see early voting, as I've spoken, on Friday, Saturday, Monday prior to the election. I want to maintain election integrity by implementing election audits. And I want to make sure that excuse absentee ballot is changed to no excuse absentee ballot. I want to make sure that those individuals who are handicapped or disabled are able to go to their polling precinct or designated area for handicapped disabled and be able to cast their vote. If they're not feeling well, they have medical clearance and the form is filled out by their medical physician and it has been verified by the office as being legit. And so in order to get the voter turnout up, we have to make sure that we educate our constituents that we are actually encouraging everyone to learn more about the voter education, voter registration, and we have to actually make sure we get out in the community and educate the community much more. But with House Bill 194 being passed by the other opponent who is not with us right now, it's putting a damper on the Secretary of State's office, it's put a damper on the Border Registrar's office, and also many of the other organizations that are on college campuses, universities, in order to get the voter outreach of education and registration out. So we will have to come up with a game plan in order to increase voter turnout, because in our midterm election, primary elections, the voter turnout was over 800,000 out of 3 million. And the turnout for the primary runoff was over 4.
Great. Oh, I think they turned your mic off. So you should be able to see there is a timer that should be showing on our pages for you to see, but there'll be opportunities to respond to each other. Mr. Shelby, what legislation, rules, policies would you focus on to make it easier to vote in our state while continuing to keep our votes secure?
Well, honestly, Ms. Lafitte, I agree with you on a lot of those things. So let me just approach this from a libertarian perspective, from a constitutionalist perspective, because I am a constitutionalist. I believe that constitutional rights should be defended. And whenever there's a conflict between something that is not a right and something that is a right, you always err on the side of protecting that right. Our right to vote is enshrined in the Constitution, the 15th Amendment for all men, and then in the 19th Amendment for all women. Much too late, but it's there. And these are things that we need to make sure we're protecting. I understand election integrity. We don't want fraudulent elections. We don't want voter fraud. The incidents, there's probably a little bit of voter fraud in every election, but not massive voter fraud. And so we don't want to go so far to where we are afraid that we are preventing people from voting. So early voting, I have no problem with that. I think that's a great idea. No excuse absentee voting, automatic voter registration. All of these things can increase voter turnout and make it easier for people to vote. We don't want to effectively disenfranchise people because they don't have the opportunity to vote. And so anything we can do to make sure that we are protecting those rights, I'd be absolutely willing to look at and advocate for.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you each just some yes or no questions to make sure we all understand where you stand on certain things. So no excuse absentee voting, supportive or unsupportive? Mr. Shelby?
Supportive.
And Ms. Lafitte?
Supportive.
Okay, how about early voting? Mr. Shelby?
Yes, supportive.
Ms. Lafitte?
Supportive.
Okay, I heard mention of multi-day voting, like there was Friday, Saturday, Sunday discussed. Mr. Shelby, are you supportive of that?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Lafitte?
Friday, Saturday, Monday.
Friday,
Yes.
Saturday, Monday, sorry. Okay, Mr.
Except
Shelby,
Sunday.
if you want to change your answer, you're welcome to. No? Okay, I want to give you both the opportunity to say then, are there areas where you maybe see disagreement as far as policies or changes to our laws? So Ms. Lafitte, I will let you go first. Do you see differences in those policies that the two of you support?
The difference is, I don't really see too much of a difference, But what I do see is that I do want to fight that election subversion where we have a lot of different polling precincts that have closed in our rural areas. And I want to make sure those particular polling precincts that may have longer lines, that we do something like split them, where there would be more accessibility to those polling precincts. I want to see that. I really do.
Okay, Mr. Shelby, you can respond to that idea or show where there's difference if you'd like.
Well, I mean, as of what we talked about just a moment ago, I don't see a lot of differences. I think more polling places is good too. Again, you err on the side of protecting rights. And if more polling places ensures that more people have the opportunity to vote and exercise that right, I think that's a good thing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I think probably where we may disagree a little bit is in regard to ballot access, though, frankly, I don't know her position on that. So I couldn't really speak to that right now.
Ms. Lafitte, would you like to share a position?
And he said that he doesn't know my position on access to
Ballot
Making
access.
it
So
easier for third-party candidates to get on the ballot.
Well, I believe that the process that is in place now, whatever we need to do to get that extra party on the ballot, to give constituents an extra voice, because many individuals may not fall under or may not be voting because they are not understanding the values of the Republican Party nor the Democratic Party, and as an independent. And they may feel that they do not have a choice, but just bringing the Libertarians aboard and giving them another area to study the candidates and see what the values are and what the Libertarian Party stands for, it gives some individual out there a choice and a voice as to how he or she will vote. And I feel that it's a good idea, because we want everyone to be a part of the democracy. And that is everyone's voice, is to have that voice to vote how he or she would like to vote.
Great, thank you. Mr. Shelby, the next question will begin with you. Alabama is one of 33 states that has joined the Electronic Registration Information Center, whose sole purpose is to improve the accuracy of America's voter rolls and increase access to voter registration for all eligible citizens. If elected, will you continue to be a member of ERIC, and why or why not?
I'm inclined to say that I would, but of course, I want to look at it, talk to the folks that are working the Secretary of State's office right now. I'm sure there's a wealth of institutional knowledge there, and get their thoughts on it. Ultimately, though, if it's something that increases the reliability of our voter rolls, that helps us to maintain safe elections, I think it's a good thing. Now, again, I'd have to dig in. I'd have to make sure, one of the things I want to look at as a libertarian, how much is this costing us? Are there more cost-effective ways to ensure that our voter rolls are accurate and that we're maintaining our elections the proper way? So I'd want to look at do kind of a cost benefits analysis. But from everything I've read about ERIC, I think that it's a good thing to be a part of, and my intent would probably be to remain.
Thank you. Ms. Lafitte, if elected, will you continue to be a member of ERIC, and why or why not?
I agree with Matt, and leadership position with the sheriff's office and military, I would have to take in leadership classes through my collegiate years and other classes. I would have to actually walk into the office, study the ERIC system, get with the team who actually is geared to and focus on the ERIC system. I will have to see if the ERIC system is a win-win. That is a win for the state of Alabama and the Secretary of State's office, and a win for the voters. When I say for a win for the voters, I want to make sure that the voters are remaining active on the voter rolls in all 67 counties. I want to make sure that it's not a cleansing system, which means that it will actually take voters off the roll, and which means it places that voter in an inactive status, is what we do not want to actually see. I do understand from the other opponent that's not with us this evening that the cost of $25,000 a year for the upkeep of the software and technology is costly, but I want to see actually the rolls, how it is effective, and to see if it's actually win-win with the state state of Alabama. I understand that in Louisiana, the Secretary of State there did in July do away with the ERIC system. Reasoning behind it, I really do not know, but they did disenroll. But I will have to make sure that I have a contingency plan in place, because if I remove the ERIC system, I have to have a contingency plan, which is a plan B. And if the B doesn't work, I have to have a plan C. I have to make sure that election integrity is upheld.
Thank you. So I know we talked some about third-party candidates and access to the ballot, making it easier. But I do want to know if there are other things that you would do to make it easier for third-party candidates to participate in the process, whether it's the primary process or the general election process. And I'll let Ms. Lafitte start, and then we'll get to Mr. Shelby.
First, I will have to look at the realm of the law for the state of Alabama. Once I peruse over the law itself and also the rules and laws within that governs the office of Secretary of State, then I will be able to give a more concisely answer. I can't just walk into the office and just actually make up different rules and regulations and policies. I have to make sure that I'm following what our legislators have etched out before us. And I have to make sure that the Constitution that governs the state of Alabama from 1901, with all the her amendments, I have to make sure that I adhere to that. But I would love to just look over it first before I give you that accurate answer.
Great, thank you. Mr. Shelby, what other changes might you make to make it easier to participate in the election process for third-party candidates?
Well, as I mentioned before, the Secretary of State cannot legislate. So we're bound by what the legislature, the laws the legislators passed. However, I would advocate for changing those laws. Again, we require 3% of the votes cast in the last gubernatorial election for petition signatures to get ballot access. That's way too high. There are states where all you need to do, like in Florida, I think you just turn in a list of your bylaws and your officers, and you're on the ballot. There are some states where all you need is 1,000 registered members, because we don't have party registration in Alabama. But I would certainly want to look at those other states that have lower ballot access requirements and pattern ourselves after them a little bit. But again, though, it would be advocating. It wouldn't be writing a law. It wouldn't be instituting it myself. It would be talking with Democrats and Republicans, talking to the people of Alabama, and getting support for these ideas to give them more choices, But I can't do it unilaterally.
Great. Mr. Shelby, we're going to stay with you, but this question will be for both of you. The following populations say that they have difficulties participating in the election process: the disabled, poor, out-of-area college students, homeless, and formerly incarcerated. So what would you do to ensure that individuals who fit these categories can be better accommodated so they can participate in the process?
Well, I think some of the things we talked about earlier, having, early voting, no excuse, absentee voting, those would help people who are, may not be able to get out of the house, may not have reliable transportation, people who struggle to get to the polls on election day itself. Now, you did mention the formerly incarcerated. I think it's maybe another issue where we agree on, but giving their voting rights back to them is very important. Once you've paid your debt to society, you should be able to vote again. We all make mistakes. Some of us get caught, but we pay the price. You pay the price for those mistakes, and once you served your time, you should have your rights back. Now, I understand there are certain crimes in Alabama where you cannot get your right back to vote, and I have to look at some of them are pretty awful. Rape, murder, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. But one thing I don't think we're doing is letting these individuals know that they can get their right to vote back. So I'd want to make sure we're educating people that, hey, there is a process for this. And I'd want to simplify the process, maybe some kind of electronic filing, something of that nature, so that it's simpler. I think right now you have to go through a whole lot to get those rights back. And I'd like to make that simpler, and also let people know that they have that ability once they've served their period of incarceration.
Thank you. Ms. Lafitte, what would you do to ensure individuals who fit the categories I mentioned: disabled, poor, out of area college students, homeless, formerly incarcerated? What would you do to encourage to make sure they're better accommodated?
Early voting for sure. And from our early voting, if there's a way that we can do online voting with security questions as if we were filling out a credit, say we're filling out a application for a credit card or a loan, there are certain security questions that only that voter will know in order to pass the security screening and security clearance. I'm willing to look at that as well. I'm also willing to have that no excuse absentee ballot where it would be forwarded back and go forth from there with the election process. I'm also looking at where the inmates, when they go to the correctional facility, become prisoners, and once they are released, if they are under the moral turpitude law, we have to adhere to that law and make sure that those serious crimes that they did commit, that they do know that their voting rights will be removed from them for the indefinite time frame that is specified until they have met the qualifications, if any, to receive them back if they can. But if they are not following underneath that moral turpitude law with the crimes that they have served their time for, I would like to have their voting rights restored immediately upon release from prison. And I want to make sure that those individuals who actually just want to just vote, just have an opportunity to vote and to make sure that their voice is heard within the democracy.
Thank you. Mr. Shelby, I wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to the idea about secure online voting. Is that something you would support?
I'd have to look at it. But again, you err on the side of protecting rights. And if we can do that in a secure manner, I mean, we bank online. All the documents and filings we have to do as candidates are online. Half of our lives are online now, and certainly we can develop a system which is secure. But again, I would need to be comfortable that it was a secure system first.
One of the groups that we mentioned on there was out of area college students. Do you feel, and we'll ask Ms. Lafitte first, do you feel like suggestions that y'all just made would make things easier for them to vote, or do you have other suggestions? So Ms. Lafitte and then Mr. Shelby.
The college students, if they are, say if we have a college student who is here at the University of South Alabama or University of Mobile in Mobile, Alabama, and they reside in Montgomery County. The problem that I do know that does exist is by them being in another county and they're not being on the voter rolls, they're not going to be able to vote on election day. So that college student is going to have to know they have to fill out what we have presently now, which is an excuse absentee ballot. Now, if we can bump it up where we can actually serve the college students similar to how we do the military and allow them to come on board and fill out their ballot in that manner, then we may have to look at that. But I do see that there may be another way that we have to do.
Oh, I think you're cut out. Great. Mr. Shelby, what is your response about ways to make it for out of area college students to participate?
Well, I think a lot of the things we talked about would help, having early voting and no excuse absentee voting. But I think a lot of it's just education. I mean, you just got your right to vote. You're 18 years old, and you may just not know that you have to go back to your home county to vote, or you have to re-register in a different county to vote for your vote to be counted. So a lot of it's education, and I would partner with the colleges and just make sure that they're letting these folks know. I know when I was in law school, one of the things that we did was register students to vote. So it's possible. We did it as volunteers, and I know that the administration can help with that and educate these folks that, hey, you can vote, but you either have to register here or you need to go back to your home county and just make sure they understand that.
Great. Ms. Lafitte, do you also think it's about education for those younger people? I saw you nodding.
Yes, it is.
It is for them. Okay, thank you.
Sum up.
This question will start with Ms. Lafitte. The current GOP leadership in Alabama is proposing to introduce legislation in the 2023 legislative session to institute partisan voter registration and to close the primaries. They've already passed a resolution at the state party convention in support of this proposed legislation. What are your thoughts on changing to a closed primary election?
Personally, I believe that it will not be a good idea because Alabama's voter turnout is extremely low. And it will make it even lower. And the reason why is because the bill will require every voter in the state of Alabama to register with either one of the parties, Republican, Democrat, depending on this election, Libertarian or Independent, however they have the bill written up. That means that before they go to their polling precinct, they have to already be registered with one of the said parties. If you have to give a voter another step before they go to the polling precinct to cast their vote, that might discourage one from voting. So I think it's a bad idea. I think that we should have a voice, how we want to select our voice within the democracy and not be told how to actually vote. I know that Alabama's a slim number with another few states who actually have open primary elections, but also I believe that it will become discriminatory because if you fill out an application for a job, that would be another reason why someone would not just only check your bio, your social media, but also to see what party you're a member of. And that might not get you the job that you may want because of the party that you registered with. And so I do not think that it will be a good idea at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Shelby, the same question for you. What are your thoughts on changing to a closed primary election?
I don't like closed primaries. I'm a libertarian, but I voted for candidates of really any political party, independents also. And I think it's important that we have a voice in our elected officials. Now, one thing I'd like to point out, and here's one something they could do, the Democrats and Republicans could do that would make me maybe in favor of that. If they stop using taxpayer money to fund their candidate selection process. Libertarian Party of Alabama, my party, we don't take taxpayer money to nominate our candidates. We don't take taxpayer money to do that. We don't have statewide primaries that the taxpayers have to fund. So if the Democrats and Republicans, or it sounds like just the Republicans right here, if they want to operate like a real private organization, that's fine, but the taxpayer shouldn't foot the bill. So if they want to have their own selection process where they go to convention like my party does and select their candidates, and in that way they can ensure that people from other parties aren't voting for their candidates, that's fine. But I highly doubt they want to do that. I highly doubt they want to do that. And I would assume the Democratic Party would prefer not to do that also.
Ms. Lafitte, would you like to respond?
Well, when it comes down to, if I understand what he said correctly, when you're speaking about taxpayers' money funding a candidate, right now, I know with the Democratic Party, we're not receiving any money at all from the National Democratic Party nor the State Democratic Party. It is the hard-working men and women from the great state of Alabama who are contributing to, I know, my campaign and many of our campaigns, and many hard-working men and women throughout the great state of Alabama. Also, we might be endorsed by some of the PACs, but because of the Political Action Committee may have money, may not have money, some of us are not receiving billions of dollars, millions of dollars, thousands of dollars. But I want to also go on record that our local Democratic parties are the ones who have stepped up and actually contributed a lot of money to us as well.
Thank you. And to be fair, Mr. Shelby, would you like to respond?
Sure, and I apologize, I may not have been clear. I was talking about the nominating process. So the taxpayers of Alabama do pay for the primaries. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party, that's paid for by the taxpayers. That's what I was referring to, not necessarily the candidates themselves and their campaigns.
Great, thank you. I'm excited that we have gotten some really great questions from the audience, and y'all should feel free to keep your questions coming. The first question from the audience that I would like to ask of y'all, and I will start with Mr. Shelby, is will you commit to providing voter information such as the voter guide in Spanish, Korean, and other languages common in Alabama?
I think it's a great idea, and they also release a minor party and independent candidate voting guides every year, which has been really helpful to myself. And certainly, we need to look at it and do a cost benefits analysis. And if there are enough people who would benefit from that, I think that probably would be a good expenditure. Again, we do need to look at the cost and see, who would benefit from that. But making that information accessible to everybody is very important. I know we're America, and a lot of people think if you're America, you speak American, of course, it's English. But we have people, we're a melting pot. We're a melting pot. And just because their first language is not English doesn't mean they shouldn't have the same access to information that all of us do, who speak English as their first language. So I think I would have to look at it certainly, but that I would definitely entertain it.
Great, thank you. Ms. Lafitte, would you commit to providing voter information like the voting guides in other languages?
I think it's a great idea because we do have a multicultural, diverse community throughout the great state of Alabama, but I also will have to look at the cost because I have to remember that the legislators do not earmark monies to the office of the Secretary of State. So I will have to make sure that the funding that is actually coming in through the Secretary of State's office to make sure that we have enough funding in order to pay for that. And also to make it a top priority. I think it's a great idea.
Great, thank you. Another great question from the audience, and I'm going to start with Ms. Feet with this question. What would you propose to increase interest in being a poll worker?
I believe education. I believe that we will have to actually get out in the community. I believe that each one of the 67 counties, the Board of Registrar's office, we will have to have people to actually kind of go out to the colleges and universities and start with our young people to get them motivated and get them actually involved. Because one thing that we want is when we go to the polling precincts, we want those people who are energized and they want to be there. They're educated, they're knowledgeable in order to make that polling precinct operation work and to uphold election integrity.
Mr. Shelby, how about you? What would you do to encourage interest in poll workers?
Well, I think that just getting people to the polls in general, making sure that their voices are heard and that they're passionate about voting can help. And I think it's a great idea to go to the colleges. I mean, we all know when you go to a polling place, it's mostly elderly people working the polls. And so grateful for all those people who dedicate their time to do that. But if we can get younger people excited about voting, if we can get younger people excited that their vote counts, that their input matters, perhaps we could recruit folks that are a little bit younger and maybe excited to do that for years or decades in the future. So I think it's a great idea to look to younger people to try to fill some of those roles also.
Great. Mr. Shelby, we're going to stay with you for the next question. What are your thoughts on straight ticket voting? So realizing that Alabama is one of 6 states that allows straight ticket ballots, do you think that should continue?
I think straight ticket voting is horrible. It's horrible. I think it's insulting to the voters of Alabama to say they don't know who to vote for. They can't do their own research and figure out who they like. And we also have situations like this year. If you go and vote straight ticket Republican or Democrat in Alabama, you may not be voting for some offices. There is no Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor. There's a Republican candidate and there's a Libertarian candidate. There's no Democratic candidate, and that's not the only office. The straight party voting is meant to prop up the duopoly. Now, I say duopoly, it's not a term, it's a term I use a lot and probably not one a lot of people do use. But what I'm talking about is a monopoly is 1, a duopoly is 2. You have the Democrats and Republicans, and it helps them gain and keep power. So straight party voting, I would absolutely want to do away with. Again, not within the purview of the Secretary of State to do that, but we could advocate for that. I think that people should have to go and do their research and pick the best candidate, and also not be left in a situation where they fill in one bubble and they're not voting on important offices like lieutenant governor, or they're not voting on other ballot measures because they think they've done their job by filling in a bubble on the first page. So that's something that needs to go. It's harmful for voters. It's harmful for candidates.
Ms. Lafitte, what is your stance on straight ticket voting?
I believe it should remain in place, and this is the reason why. A lot of individuals do know who they want to cast their vote for, and they want to vote straight ticket and go forth. That is part of their voice. Also, I believe because we see in the Republican Party, I'm going to use them for an example, a lot of their money is millions of dollars poured into their campaign coffins, and a lot of their advertisements are out there, and people know who they actually are because they have a big war chest to do the political arena with, and letting the voters know exactly who they are, where they're standing on issues in their platform. Right now, as being a Democrat and Libertarian and whomever else, it's hard for us to get our platform out there because some of us do not have millions of dollars coming into our campaign coffins. So we have to go to different organizations for endorsements, and those organizations kindly endorse us and get the information out, and some of them encouraged for the straight party voting because they have screened all the candidates and they know exactly who is going to be the best voice for the community. So I believe it should remain in place. Now, I was told that now presently, I will have to do a little bit more research, is that if you do vote straight ticket, the office that the Democratic Party, yes, does not have anyone running for that lieutenant governor position, but you can write someone in or vote for one of your choice. But I will have to actually study that. But I was told in the past.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Lafitte, we'll stick with you with this next question. The Alabama voter registration forms are currently not accessible to the blind and the visibly impaired. How would you address making voting more accessible for these groups?
I would actually have to look at that a little bit more and see how the law has been written up in order to have them accessible to the information, but also they should be accessible to a telephone. If they do not have the telephone audio to use in order to vote, they should be allowed a device in order to cast their vote that is approved by the blind and deaf, etc. I will have to look at it and see how they have it written up.
Mr. Shelby, again, the voter registration forms are currently not accessible to the blind and visibly impaired. How would you address those issues?
Well, I assume the one thing people want to look at is maybe Braille. I don't know if there's a big enough call for that to go to that expense, but I will certainly want, if there's not right now where someone who is blind or visually impaired can call a hotline and then have assistance in getting registered, there needs to be somebody to help with that. We certainly need to take those concerns very seriously. Just because you're blind or visually impaired doesn't mean your vote shouldn't count, doesn't mean you shouldn't be registered. One of the things that we could do would be automatic voter registration, although a lot of that's tied to getting a driver's license, which of course wouldn't apply to the blind and visually impaired most of the time. But I would like to look at any options we could have to make it easier for them. And if there's a big enough call for it, and we can do it in a fiscally responsible way, and have some kind of Braille or have a special office dedicated to that, I think that'd be wonderful. But again, you have to look at the cost to make sure that we can afford to do that.
Great. Last question before we go to closing remarks. Mr. Shelby, I'll start with you. Are there currently programs administered by the current Secretary of State that you would eliminate or change because of financial or policy reasons?
That's hard to say without getting in there. The Secretary of State, as Ms. Lafitte mentioned earlier, they do a lot of things. So in terms of saving money, you want to look at it from top to bottom. You want to look at the folks who are working there now. I mentioned the wealth of institutional knowledge I'm sure is in that office. I think in a lot of offices where the executive is elected, the expectation is that they come in and they fire everybody and hire their own staff. That's not something I'd want to do. I would want to talk to these folks, roundtable with them, the leaders in different departments, ask them, what are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not working? What are we doing that we're spending too much money on? And what do we need to put more resources towards? So that would be something I really have to look at once in office. There's nothing I'm willing to put on the chopping block right now. That being said, I am very fiscally conservative, and anything we can do to save money without infringing upon anybody's right to vote or disenfranchising anybody, I would be interested in that.
Ms. Lafitte, are there current programs administered by the current Secretary of State that you would want to eliminate?
I will have to go in and look through a condensed lens and actually see the operation for itself. I will have to take a democratic approach also with it, which means that I will have my leadership role, but also I will have to listen to the people who actually makes the operation of the Secretary of State's office work and the Board of Registrar's office throughout all 67 counties, and then go from there and see what actually will be the best approach in order to continue to effectively run that office with accountability, integrity, excellence, and keeping transparency and making transparency more visible within the office.
Well, thank you both for answering those questions, and thank you to the audience for your great questions. What we'll do now is allow for each candidate to give their closing remarks. They'll each have 2 minutes. We'll start with Ms. Lafitte, and anything that you want to share, go ahead.
I want to let everyone know that I will bring integrity, excellence, accountability. I will bring the transparency to the office of the Secretary of State as your next Chief of Election Officer. I want to actually implement early voting in the state of Alabama. I want to have curbside voting, amend that curbside voting law to where the handicap and disability will be able to vote by curbside. I want to have those who are prisoners, once they are released, have their voting rights restored immediately, but I have to uphold moral turpitude law. I want to make sure that we have automatic voter registration. I want to make sure that I be a voice for all the constituents through the great state of Alabama, upholding election integrity by implementing election audits after every election, and then fight voter suppression, fight also the new GOP way of election subversion, and make sure that I uphold election integrity during my administration.
Great. Mr. Shelby.
Well, thank you so much again for having us. It's been great to answer some questions and learn more of Ms. Lafitte's ideas. And, I think we agreed on a lot. And I think that's a good thing when people can get together and share ideas and have agreement. But the fact is, and again, I don't necessarily mean this as reflective on Ms. Lafitte, as long as the Democrats and Republicans are in power, we are not going to see real positive change for the people of Alabama. The Democratic Party, as I mentioned, they're not even running a full slate of candidates. They have automatic ballot access across the state, and they can't even run a candidate for lieutenant governor. The Republican Party doesn't send its candidates to debates at all. Wes Allen isn't here. When I ran in 2018 for State House 6 in Baldwin County, my opponent didn't debate either. And they mislead constituents. You have the 2018, 2019, all the Republicans talked small government, got in office, and immediately raised taxes through the gas tax. So it's hard to trust folks like that. So we need real change, and we need real change in the Secretary of State's office, because voting is so very important. We need what we're doing, and what we have been doing for years it's just not working. And I'm talking about things Democrats and Republicans don't want to talk about, because frankly, the kind of changes I want to see could loosen their grip of power. I want to analyze our voting systems and see if there's a more fair way that provides full representation for differing points of views. As I mentioned, ranked choice voting. There's also approval voting. The ranked choice voting, for instance, would save taxpayers money because they have instant runoff, so we don't have to have a second or a third runoff election. And so I think that's important. Similarly, I would much rather see the Democratic and Republican parties bear their fiscal burden of their nominating processes, just like the Libertarian Party does. the Libertarian Party has no issues nominating candidates without spending 6 or 7 figures on these elections. So in order to give people more of a voice, more options in voting, and a more fair voting system, I think having a Libertarian in the Secretary of State's office would be incredibly beneficial to the entire state of Alabama.
Well, thank you both so much. I know one area that there's agreement is that people should turn out to vote on November 8th, 2022. I want to personally thank Democratic candidate Pamela Lafitte and Libertarian candidate Matt Shelby for participating in this debate. And now I want to turn things over to League of Women Voters President Kathy Jones, and also bring your attention to the www.vote411.org website, so you can get nonpartisan election information about voting, races, and candidates. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. This has been a fantastic forum. I feel like we've learned a lot, and I appreciate both candidates for working with us to help the voters of Alabama understand the importance of the Secretary of State's office, and also just giving us an opportunity to learn more about you. And I hope everyone feels the same way, is that this was a valuable experience. We need more of these types of discussions. We would love to have in the future all the candidates being here with us to talk to us about their positions on the issues. And thank you, Marissa, for highlighting Vote 411. That is a place where everyone can get their personalized ballot based on where you live. And I also wanted to point out that there are some there's some dates coming up that people need to be aware of. October 24th is the deadline to register to vote. If you have moved since the last election, you need to go in and update your voter registration, because like Matt and Pamela said, there is no automatic voter registration in Alabama. So if you don't update your voter registration, you will not be allowed to vote. And so we want everybody voting. We feel like our democracy will work a whole lot better if everybody is able to vote. And just wanted to point out that there are several different races on the ballot this year. And just to highlight, this is the midterm. And so this year we've got the Secretary of State is one of the offices. This is the election when you're going to be selecting the state representatives, the governor, all the way down, Secretary of State, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Auditor, Treasurer, Commissioner of Agriculture and Industries, as well as your state house and your state. You've got Alabama Supreme Court. You've got 2 of the Public Service Commission positions and 4 of the State Board of Education positions, as well as a U.S. Senate and all of your U.S. House of Representatives. So you need to help us. If you could help us get people to the polls, I know that the Secretary of State's office would appreciate that, because we need more people voting. And thank you all, and hope everyone has a good evening. Thank you. And I wish everybody good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.